Well, let's bring in three members of Parliament now from the House of Commons, from the Health Committee, to talk about this Conservative motion and whether or not we might be headed towards a fast track to another confidence test on Monday. It seems today like perhaps we're not. We'll talk about that. Darren Fisher is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health. John Barlow is a Conservative member of the Health Committee. And Don Davies is the health critic for the NDP. Good to see you all. Mr. Barlow, let me start with you, if I can, since this is a Conservative motion. It calls for the production of thousands of documents from various government departments, emails and memos from the Prime Minister's office and so on, all in just 15 days. What is it you want to find out, and why is it so urgent?
Well, I think there's no question for all of us as members of Parliament and our constituents, the COVID pandemic is the number one issue facing Canadians. What we want to know is the answers to, I think, questions that just about every Canadian wants to know. What is the pathway forward for vaccines? Why have we been so slow to access rapid testing? Why was our early warning system dismantled? Why do we not have access to home testing? What is the impact on mental health? A variety of issues. But I think it's important that these documents say how we got to where we are, what decisions were made on developing the pandemic programs, and where do we go from here.
All right.
There's no question these documents are important.
All right. Mr. Fisher, we're hearing from the Prime Minister's office today that this will not be a confidence vote when it comes before the House for a vote on Monday. So I guess where does that leave? Does that mean the government's inclined to push forward with this? And if not, what are some of the concerns you have about this motion?
Well, thank you. And first, if I could just say hello to my colleagues. Don, I know quite well, and Mr. Barlow, I don't know very well yet, but I assume we'll get to know each other very well working on the committee. And I do want to say, and I think Don can attest to this, that we have worked in the past as a very good committee, a very collaborative committee. And it's unfortunate that there's a stumbling block in the first two meetings. When we walked into the first meeting, there was, a motion on the floor for Mr. Van Bynen to study mental health as it pertains to COVID-19, which is an epidemic within an epidemic and is something that we see as incredibly important. And we thought that we would sit down as a committee and come up with some ideas of some studies that we would want to do. And it didn't turn out that way. We got handed a 3 or 4 page motion, which covered all of the nuts and bolts from A to Z or right. A to Q. Now, in fairness, there was nobody in the committee that said that we didn't feel we should continue to study COVID-19. That is something that I think, and Don and then Mr. Barlow.
But I got to move you along. You know how widespread, how wide-sweeping this motion is. Are you
Absolutely.
okay? You're the health minister saying today, look, you're asking for too much too quick. Is that the only issue here? If you can negotiate a timeline that's a little more generous, perhaps, than 15 days, are Liberals on side with pushing ahead with this kind of investigation?
So when you're speaking about the production of the documents portion of the motion, this is a big omnibus motion. And, when it comes to the production of the documents, it is absolutely going to impact our response to COVID. There's no question. We have public health officials, public servants who are working around the clock. And I know Don doesn't necessarily agree with this point of view. And I know I've heard Mr. Barlow disagree with this as well. But, this is, we're entering the second wave. We need to look forward and look current and not necessarily at this moment look to the past. All
right. Mr. Davies, do you accept that the government's reasoning for that? Look, you're asking for way too much. It'll stop the whole COVID response while we go looking for documents. You don't buy it?
Well, it depends if you want to talk spin or you want to talk facts. I mean, the facts is just read the motion. The motion is not broad. In fact, the motion that guided the Health Committee for the first 6 months of the year said that we were to study the COVID-19 pandemic and the government's response. You don't get any broader than that. And that allowed us to delve into all sorts of issues that we went into. We heard from 171 witnesses. So this motion that came before us is the same. As John just said, it reflects the fact that we think we should be studying COVID-19, which is the number one public health issue in the country. And then it lists a number of issues that say we can look into any area, such as the following.
Right.
And then it lists a bunch. It doesn't require us to go anywhere. So I categorically reject that this is sweeping or any different than anything else we're doing. Number two, in terms of production, the Liberals have refused to produce one document. Frankly, I have no idea why they would be reluctant to let the Health Committee look at certain documents, and this is targeted production. This isn't broad. We're looking for documents relating to Canada's early warning system, into our vaccine development and protocol, and our PPE readiness.
Okay, let me.
So these are important for the committee to have in order to focus our examinations.
All right, Mr. Barlow, let me move back to you. You're asking for a lot of documents. You want them in 15 days. Couple of things. Are you willing to extend, have a conversation about extending the timeline? Number one, and number two, what do you is the purpose of this committee to try and pin blame on the government or find faults in the government's response so that you can make the government look bad? That's the concern I think the Liberals have.
Sure, I'll answer your first question first. We asked several times today during the debate and during question period, if 15 days is too quick, what would be the timeline? What would you like to see? Is it
right,
30 days?
The minister wouldn't give you a timeline.
Days? Wouldn't give us an answer. So we've opened the door to those negotiations, but we want a definitive answer. We don't want this to go on in perpetuity. To answer your second question, no, this is not to lay blame. The whole point of this is to find out how we got here. If there have been successes, and the Liberals spoke all day today about how amazing their programs are, well, if that's the case, then why are you concerned about putting these documents out for public view and accountability and scrutiny? If that's the point, then we should be able to celebrate that. And I find it interesting that they're saying, the public sector workers can't manage to walk and chew gum here. I'm not saying they're not doing a good job, but the minister's also given herself special powers to demand documents from drug companies. So it's kind of hypocritical when drug companies should be busy making vaccines and rapid tests and to ask them for documents, but it's not okay when we're asking the Liberal government for documents.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, let me come back to you. Do you accept the opposition premise that we're hearing here, that there is an urgency to examining your government's COVID response, and that there needs to be a critical examination of what's been working and what hasn't? And you can't really do that unless you can see exactly how government plans and responses were laid out by pouring through documents and calling before the committee the people who put the response together. Is that fair?
I absolutely believe that there will need to be a time for a debrief or a post-mortem on Canada's response to COVID-19. In the middle of the resurgence, or the second wave, as some people call it, is not the time to look backwards. It's the time to look current and look forward. And that is, I think, what the crux of one of our arguments are. We take these public health, public servants away from their job to sift through, you said thousands, it's more like tens of thousands of documents, and put them on that task when their task right now is, and the task of the government at this moment.
So let me ask you what happens
is to keep Canadians safe.
If the government does not make it a test of confidence when we have the vote on Monday, given the Bloc supports it, the NDP supports it, Conservatives support it, it's likely going to pass. That motion then compels the committee to do that. So you'll follow that order from the House if that's what happens if the motion passes, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, this is, again, you can ask anyone I've served with on committee. We're a very collaborative bunch, and this is something that, we understand the importance of continuing a study on COVID-19. I hope that we can continue to look current and look forward in the studies that we choose. Going back to Mr. Van Bynen's motion on mental health, that was the first motion that was put forward, and that is a very important motion to the constituents in Dartmouth-Cole Harbour. And it was shut down. The debate was adjourned, and that was a little bit disappointing. So, and going back to the comments about how many people we have seen and how many experts that we've had in front of the committee, we had one meeting specifically on mental health. So one of the concerns I have, and that's something that could possibly be fleshed out at the committee, is working on how many meetings per. Now, other members
that sounds like the mechanics of what happens after the motion passes and how you deal with that committee. Mr. Davies, I guess, for now, the government's saying it's not a confidence motion. I'm wondering if that possibility that could change over the weekend as we get towards the vote on Monday. And let me ask you this: if it turns into a confidence test, how wedded is the NDP to making sure this motion passes? I'm guessing if you didn't want an election Wednesday, you won't want one on Monday if they make it a test of confidence.
Well, it would be absurd to make it a motion of confidence. The Liberals are at Finance and Ethics committees arguing against filibustering those committees, arguing that it's taking away from the real focus, which should be on COVID-19. So here we are at the Health Committee trying to study COVID-19. It would be absurd if they're filibustering and stopping that. Look, Canadians want answers. They want an end to these games. They want us to be working collaboratively and productively and getting answers. And by the way, this motion is not looking at things in the past or seeking to lay blame. It's seeking to get documents on where we're at now so we can chart a path forward.
Okay.
So things like where are we at with vaccines? What is the distribution protocol for that? Do our first responders have enough PPE? Where are we at with our early warning system in case there's a third wave? So this is not just about looking backward. This is about getting a good snapshot of where we are at now and how we can best move forward, and how the Health Committee can not only hold the government accountable, but also make positive suggestions to the government so how we can keep Canadians safer.
Right.
They've made a lot of mistakes so far. We want to help avoid those mistakes going forward.
That's our time. Happy to hear all your perspectives tonight, gentlemen, and perhaps we'll follow up again next week when we see where this motion goes. But Darren Fisher, John Barlow, and Don Davies, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Peter.
guys. Take care.
Thanks, Peter.